Well, hooray for Abby Martin. She actually won her court case suing the state of Georgia, or at least going against them regarding their law that bans people from participating in the BDS movement. This was something that she was prevented from speaking at a university. It was withdrawn. She was invited to speak at a Georgia university. And when they found out that she was for the BDS movement, they said, oh, no. It's against the law here in Georgia. And so she challenged that law and actually won. Thank God, because listen, this was an absolute infringement on the First Amendment. So here it is. Now, this is something that was written. This was a while ago, said in January 2020. This is from Jewish Times, Atlanta Jewish Times, says 2020, Georgia's anti-BDS law challenged. In January 2020, filmmaker Abby Martin's invitation to speak at Georgia Southern University was withdrawn when she would not pledge to refrain from boycotts against Israel. They make you sign a paper, right? So the way that this law would work is if you wanted a government contract, or if you were going to be paid a certain amount of money, anything over the amount of $1,000. So obviously she was going to be offered more than $1,000 to speak at Georgia Southern University. If you're going to be given more than $1,000 by the government, you were being forced to sign a paper. They would, this extra paper they would give to you. And that extra paper said you have to ensure that you are going to refrain from BDS, the BDS movement, and any boycotts against Israel. That's crazy. It is crazy that a foreign country could have so much leverage over our politicians that they would be able to get this type of law in the United States of America passed. That is insane. And people should really start questioning what the hell is going on. Could you imagine if that were China or Russia or Vietnam or Cuba or Afghanistan or Venezuela, anywhere in the world? Could you imagine if those governments were able to strong arm our politicians to the point where they said, you're not allowed to go against us. And if you do, hell to pay. So you make sure no one goes against us, that no one can boycott China. No one can boycott Cuba or Vietnam or Venezuela or Russia or wherever you want to boycott. Could you imagine if you were told you couldn't boycott some other country? Except that is exactly what happens when it comes to Israel. You're allowed to boycott any other country in the world, but you can't boycott Israel. That is what some states were trying to enact. And Abby Martin for the state of Georgia, she challenged it. She challenged it. So it says right here, Georgia's anti-BDS boycott, divestment, and sanctions law was challenged in January by a documentary filmmaker whose invitation to speak at the Georgia Southern University was withdrawn when she would not pledge to refrain from boycotts against Israel. When Abby Martin refused to sign the state-mandated pledge, her invitation to be the keynote speaker at the 2020 International Critical Media Literacy Conference at Georgia Southern Savannah campus was withdrawn, and the February 28th and 29th conference was canceled. Georgia law requires that anyone signing a contract valued at $1,000 or more with a state agency sign the pledge. Could you imagine? I mean, this is so ridiculous. People really need to wake up. This is a foreign country. This is a foreign country. And we're being strong-armed to support them, or else. So this is what, now, if you're not familiar with the BDS movement, it says right here, the BDS movement seeks to apply economic and political pressure to force Israel to change its policies towards the Palestinians, including construction in the West Bank, often referred to by religious and nationalist Jews as Judea and Samaria. Jews don't even call it as the West Bank. They call it Judea and Samaria. So you're not allowed to participate in BDS, which is boycott, divest, and sanction against the state of Israel, or else you won't get your contracts. You won't make your living. Well, here it is. As of yesterday, breaking news: CARE and PCJF win major victory in federal lawsuit against Georgia's anti-Israel boycott law. Court rules anti-BDS law violates the First Amendment. Yes, obviously it does. So this is talking about Abby Martin and her constitutional right, how that was infringed upon when it canceled her speaking engagement because she refused to sign a state-mandated oath pledging not to engage in boycotts of Israel. It says right here, In 2016, Governor Nathan Deal signed a law, SB 327, which requires any person or company that enters into a contract with the state of Georgia worth $1,000 or more to sign a loyalty oath pledging not to engage in political boycotts of the Israeli government based on its treatment of Palestinians. Honestly, can anyone, listen to that. That is insane. A loyalty oath to a foreign country. That is absurd. Could you imagine if Democrats said, you've got to do this for China now? You're going to have to sign a loyalty oath. People would flip. They would absolutely flip. Imagine if Democrats found out Republicans were saying, listen, you got to sign a loyalty oath to Russia. Got to sign that loyalty oath. Obviously Trump did, right? Because he was sitting there meeting with Putin. Putin was his supreme leader. So you got to sign one too. Could you imagine? It says here, in his 29-page decision, Judge Cohen identified extensive constitutional problems with Georgia's anti-BDS law. He held that the anti-BDS law prohibits inherently expressive conduct protected by the First Amendment, which burdens Martin's right to free speech. He also ruled that the anti-BDS law's requirement that Martin sign an oath to refrain from boycotting Israel is, quote, no different than requiring a person to espouse certain political beliefs or to engage in certain political associations, unquote. Absolutely right. This is awesome. This is an incredible win. Congratulations to Abby Martin and those who helped in this lawsuit. This was a major win for our First Amendment rights. Now, I am personally not a big supporter of the BDS movement itself. And the reason is because I believe that movements have leadership and that otherwise a movement is kind of pointless if the leadership isn't clear as to what the purpose of the movement is. And even though the people who participate in BDS, the average person participating in BDS believes that all they want is equal treatment for the Palestinians, that means a lot of things. So what does that mean exactly? So the average person says, well, I just don't like the way they treat Palestinians, so I'm participating in BDS. The problem is the actual leadership of BDS, and this is a criticism that Black Lives Matter gets, is, the leadership is very radical. And I've researched Black Lives Matter leadership, and much of their leadership is quite radical, actually. And same with BDS. The leadership is quite radical. In fact, I sat down and interviewed one of the leaders of the BDS movement while I was in the West Bank, and I was incredibly shocked at how radical she actually was. She was very, very, very radical. So when Israel says, look, the BDS movement wants to wipe us off the face of the planet, I don't think they're wrong on that when it comes to the leadership. To be honest, from what I saw and what I heard, I don't think they're wrong. I think the leadership does actually want the state of Israel to disappear. I know that. So that is why for me, I can't support that particular movement. I am absolutely not against boycotting and divesting from Israel in another movement. So it's not the action that I'm against. I'm just against this particular movement with this particular leadership who are using the movement to strong arm the government and make demands. They're the mouthpiece. You're only as strong, you're only as whatever your movement is, it only is what it is based on what your mouthpiece says it is, right? So when the mouthpiece is speaking on your behalf to the government, that is what you're protesting for, whether you really agree with it or not. And that's kind of the problem with the BDS movement, is that the people in charge of it are quite radical in what their ideal outcome is. And I think it's way more radical than the outcome of what people who participate think. People who participate, I think they just don't know. And they think it's just, we just want the Palestinians to be treated nicely. And that is not actually the expressed outcome that those in charge of the BDS movement want. And also, I'll tell you, the vast majority of Palestinians in the West Bank and in Gaza, they don't even know what the BDS movement is. So you're not really doing something on their behalf that they're all like, do it for us. They don't even know about it. It's not something they know or care about. So, there's that as well. But I really believe that if we are going to put pressure on the Israeli government, which I believe could be done fully by boycotts, divesting, and sanctioning, I do think we could do that to put pressure on them. But I want the message of what we're asking for to be much clearer and much less radical than what the current BDS movement asks for. So that is my reason for not supporting the BDS movement. I don't support the leadership. And I think your company or your protest or your, whatever it is only as good as your leadership. So that is my personal take on that. But I'm not against the actual action. And I'm certainly, absolutely, 100% against governments trying to tell you you don't have the right to do whatever it is you damn well please when it comes to your First Amendment. You are allowed to boycott and protest anybody you want. And I'll be damned if somebody tells you otherwise. And thank God Abby Martin went and actually said, Georgia, you be damned. And she won. She won that case. So congratulations to Abby Martin. Thank you to Abby Martin. Thank you, actually, for doing this for all of us, because this is important for all of us. All right, I will be back 30 seconds. And we're going to talk about the concept of the human shield. We've heard this a lot. Anthony Blinken went and just spoke to Netanyahu, meeting with him. And they give a lot of excuses as to why they blew up the AP buildings, why they blow up mosques, why they blow up schools. And it all comes down to, well, Hamas is using civilians as human shields. We are going to fact check that. That is coming up next.